Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be Jurassic World Rebirth, number 2 would be F1, number 3 would be How to Train Your Dragon, number 4 would be Elio, and number 5 would be M3GAN 2.0. And me oh my, made one fatal mistake this weekend. Some of you did not make that mistake. Congratulations if you guessed correctly. I got so close with 4 out of 5 of my predictions, though. Man, I should have figured that one movie in particular, and you probably can tell by now, one movie in particular was gonna, have a bit more of a steep drop than some of the others. But let's go over what happened in the overall top 10. Number 1 was Jurassic World Rebirth. That's kind of obvious, kind of dominating the 4th of July weekend. I was curious, though. The only thing I was really curious about was where Dominion kind of left us. I was wondering how the audience was gonna respond to a new Jurassic World movie at this point, because you can kind of see with each new World movie a bit of diminishing returns. If you look at just the worldwide numbers, the first World obviously was making history before Force Awakens came out, but that made over $1 billion. Fallen Kingdom also made over $1 billion, but not quite much. But then Dominion kind of barely squeaked by $1 billion, and it didn't outgross where Jurassic Park's unadjusted for inflation number was worldwide. So I was curious, okay, where does Rebirth fall in now? Because it's still making a lot of money, those other 3 movies. But I did wonder, what does that mean for Rebirth, though? We're starting over with a new cast. It seems like we're not continuing any kind of storyline from before, and it did get a B cinema score, which, isn't the lowest. The lowest was the B- for Jurassic Park 3, but it's still not high enough to beat the B+ for Lost World. But also, all 3 of the other Jurassic World movies got at least an A or an A-, which I find a little shocking because Dominion's kind of bafflingly bad, but, I digress. But it didn't do too bad for itself. It opened for the 3-day weekend to $91 million. That adds to a 5-day opening, because this opened up on a Wednesday, of $147 million, and worldwide adds to a total of $318, which is just a little bit below Lilo and Stitch's worldwide debut, a little bit over Minecraft, but a little below Lilo and Stitch. So this is the second, highest opening globally for a new release film this year. That's pretty great already, at least for this year. And then when you go to the Jurassic Park franchise, we're just going to look at the domestic openings right here, the 3-day ones. It's 41 million over the original film's opening weekend, and the third films, they kind of open around the same, those two. And it's 19 million over the Lost World's opening weekend, but it is 54 million below Dominion, 57 million below Fallen Kingdom, and 117 million below the first Jurassic World. So yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. As far as just the 3-day opening weekend stats, and, it's a bit tricky because this one opened up on a Wednesday, how much of that money from those 2 days would have actually been jammed into the weekend if they just stuck with the traditional 3-day opening? Who knows? But it definitely did show for me, this franchise will probably never reach the heights of, that financial success that the first Jurassic World movie was. You can still say this is a bit of, diminishing returns, but that being said, on a budget of $180 million, that's the initial production budget, and from what I understand, this was run pretty tightly. They announced Gareth Edwards was going to direct it January of last year, or, the beginning of last year, sometime then, and the movie's out on time. They got it out on their preferred release date. They made the movie. I just feel like they probably did not go over that budget that much, and opening to over 300 million already is pretty damn good. They're already kind of close to doubling this budget. Obviously, Superman's around the corner, Fantastic Four's around the corner. There's still heavy competition around the corner, but this is still not a bad debut for just this one movie, not for the franchise, because it's smack dab in the middle of the recent trilogy and the original trilogy. It's also not a bad debut for Gareth Edwards' filmography. 91 million over Monsters, obviously, and 77 million over The Creator. It's 54 million below Rogue One's opening, but just 2 million shy of what his Godzilla movie opened to. So I would say, not too bad of a debut at all. It may not be reaching the heights of where this franchise has been before, but this is still a pretty hopeful sign, at least for the producers of this film. No, we can still get something out of this. something about this franchise audiences do like to see. Like we will still get a large amount of people, and they can maybe work off of that, try to get even more people in for the next installment if they do make another one. I mean, I would assume they would. I think my assumption was like they're kicking off a new Jurassic World trilogy or something like that, but it feels very self-contained in a way that the first Jurassic World did but didn't. As far as outgrossing any other films for the Jurassic franchise, it needs $34 million until it gets past JP3. That's it as of right now. For Gareth Edwards, it outgrossed Monsters by $147 million, because obviously, and it's $107 million over the creator. It needs $53 million until it outgrosses the entire domestic run of Godzilla, which is, that's a pretty damn good sign, The 3-day opening of your movie making $2 million shy of the opening of Godzilla, but catching up very quickly to that one's domestic run is pretty great. Obviously, in case you don't remember, that Godzilla movie opened really strong, but kind of, it still did very well, but it kind of, dropped off as it went on pretty quickly. So that explains the catch up there. And then worldwide, like I said, $318 million. It still needs to outgross Jurassic Park 3 by $47 million here. And then worldwide for Gareth Edwards, it's $313 million over Monsters and $214 million over the creator. It needs $211 million until it gets to Godzilla. So Godzilla's the one to beat. I don't know if this one will have the legs to catch up to Rogue One, especially with the upcoming onslaught of blockbusters, but maybe this could be one of those things where, these movies kind of, like Superman's probably going to dominate next weekend, but with an opening this big, especially when you take into account this is a 5-day opening, they might be able to share, especially as the weeks go on and these movies, are out at the same time. I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see. So far, this is not a bad debut at all for Jurassic. Number 2 is F1, and if you remember last weekend, we were talking about how it was a pretty damn good opening. It's Apple's best opening for sure, and we were kind of wondering, how does this do? Not just against Jurassic World, but just going on, how does it hold over? And, the drop-off isn't too bad. It's a little over 50% domestically, so it did make $26 million this weekend, which now adds to a domestic total of $109 million, but worldwide it's bumped up to $293, so well over the $200 million initial production budget that they claim is the correct one. Not $300 million, because that's way off according to Bruckheimer and Kaczynski. But the fact that they're already well over the initial production budget and they're about $107 million away from making that double point, yeah, I think it's safe to say they're in a pretty good spot overall as far as like reaching a break-even point, or at least getting there pretty closely while they're in theaters. For Apple domestically, it is $48 million over Napoleon and $41 million over Killers of the Flower Moon now, and then worldwide it is $137 million over Killers of the Flower Moon and $76 million over Napoleon, so it's officially in both places the highest grossing Apple original film. That's pretty damn good. That's a win for that company that they really needed. I don't know if this will necessarily, convince them to, go back to theatrical and really reinforce that. I think they just might be a little pickier as they go on, instead of just doing it kind of willy-nilly. Argyle, Fly Me to the Moon, throw those in theaters, throw a bunch of money at them. Oh no, they're flopping. What do we do? I think they're not going to do that. I think they might just still be pickier, but I think this might show them like you don't have to completely abandon the idea. As far as Joseph Kosinski's films, domestically it has outgrossed Oblivion by $20 million and needs $63 million until Tron Legacy, and then worldwide, same movies, it's $6 million over Oblivion and it needs $106 million until Tron Legacy. So yeah, more wins here, and once again, I'm still curious to see how it'll continue to hold over, at least domestically. Worldwide, it's, racking up some good money, but, kind of like what I was saying with Jurassic World, maybe, with Superman and Fantastic Four, these big blockbusters can kind of share audiences, they can have good runs together. Maybe F1 is also another one that's, it had a, over 50% drop off this weekend, but maybe that's just good signs of like, well, that's just because there's another big one, just give it some time, keep it in theaters for a bit, and it can continue to rack up some stuff. Number 3 is How to Train Your Dragon, making $11 million, adding to a domestic total of $224, so that is $7 million over the original film. It is officially the highest grossing film in the franchise domestically. Whoop-de-doo. And then worldwide, it's rising up in the ranks. It's now at $516 million, so it's $21 million over the original film's worldwide run, 4 million away from outgrossing the second film, and then after that, they're on to the Hidden World. So yeah, I think safe to say they're on track to be the highest grossing film in the entire franchise domestically and worldwide at this point, which, yeah, I think we all kind of assume that could be happening. That's the thing, is you already get a great movie in theaters many years ago, and then if you remake it and it's not as good, but people, love that nostalgia, they'll go see this one more. Just numbers, like comparison-wise, more people will see it this time around because, they've had the years to see it in theaters or at home, and to, rewatch it and love it, and then, or to grow up with it, and then it comes back in a new form, maybe a less superior form, but it's still the same thing, kind of. That's just how it works, baby, and it's a little depressing. Just a little sad. Who cares? Let's move on to number 4, which is Elio, making 5.7 million, adding to a domestic total of 55 million. Yeah, unlike F1 or How to Train Your Dragon, which have been, holding over pretty well with all these other films coming out, Elio just kind of, it can't really catch its groove. It's still not outgrossed onward domestically. It needs 6 million to get there, and then worldwide it's sitting at 96 million. So not only is it 4 million shy of that 100 million, milestone, but it's 24 million until it outgrosses Soul. It still hasn't outgrossed any other Pixar film in the week since we've talked about it. Yeah, I think, for the past couple videos I've been like, well, I don't want to rule it out. It could be an Elemental type deal. I think maybe it's safe to say at this point, I don't want to jinx it, but I think it's safe to say at this point, yeah, it's just not going to get there. And especially reading like a, recent report about how different the movie was, and then they changed it, and how much that probably, that probably added to the budget. I'm just going to assume, yeah, they really needed a big win with this. And that's not what they're getting here. Man, the fact that like they felt like they had to fucking alter the movie this much, and it only added to the budget, and now it's like not doing well in theater. It's like, man, if they had just left it as is, if they had just stuck with like, their original vision, maybe that could have, been better. Maybe that would have resonated better. But I guess that's just, hypothetical at this point. There's no way to really prove that, I guess. I know, test audiences were asked the question, like, would you pay to see this? And apparently none of them said they would. But I mean, never mind. I don't want to get into a tangent about test audiences. They can be helpful, but they can also be really fucking dumb. I don't know. Who cares? Whatever. It's a bomb. Let's move on to number 5, which is 28 years later. Having a drop off last weekend that was pretty big, I would say, but, still clinging on and, in the top 5 still. Making 4.6 million, adding to a domestic total of 60 million. For Danny Boyle, it is behind Yesterday by 13 million at this point, and then worldwide it is sitting at 125 million. So 29 million is the distance away from Yesterday's worldwide run there, but it did double its 60 million initial production budget at this point. So even though it did have a significant drop off last weekend, I think they might still be in a good position here. Like, they can do the math here and be like, you know what, this is still pretty damn good, all things considered. Don't put 28 years later 2 on streaming. Don't make it a streaming exclusive, just put it in theaters. And I think potentially the audience could just continue to grow. At least, if this movie is resonating like I hope it is, the audience will continue to grow with the next one. And hopefully, the people at Sony see that as well and fund the third film that I don't think they've shot yet. So yeah, good news for that film. Now with these next two, they're technically tied, but I'm just going to make an educated guess and say that the one that's probably going to come out on top is number 6, Lilo and Stitch, making 3.8 million, adding to a domestic total of 408 million. So that places it 96 million away from Beauty and the Beast domestically. Worldwide, it is now sitting at 972 million. So damn, 28 million away from hitting $1 billion. It's right within reach for them. They've outgrossed Favreau's Jungle Book by 21 million. They now need 53 million until Alice in Wonderland. That's all well and good. But the biggest thing here that you probably want to hear about is that it's technically tied with our, our number 7 film here, which is M3GAN 2.0. And you might be like, Jackson, why are you so quick to assume that Lilo and Stitch is probably going to end up above it when the official numbers come out? And that's because, when you look at the difference of percentages, Lilo and Stitch from last weekend dropped about like 40 to 50%, kind of expected at this point. They're, making lower numbers. They've been out for a while. M3GAN dropped a little over 60%. and it didn't already have a great debut. So I'm willing to believe that this one probably is not going to perform better than Lilo and Stitch this weekend. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my guess. Like I said, it made $3.8 million, adding to a domestic total of 18.5. That places it 77 million away from the original film. And worldwide, we have some worldwide totals. It is sitting at $30.6 million. So that places it 151 million away from the original film. Now, if Wikipedia is to be believed, the budget being 15 to 25 million, this is not, the 30.6 million. I mean, if you go by the 15 million point, they've kind of barely broken even. If you go by 25, they still have a ways to go. This is a movie that's gonna just kind of barely squeak by breaking even. But with the first movie doing as well as it did, this is definitely a huge disappointment for them. It is interesting to hear Jason Blum kind of talk about the failure, though, kind of immediately almost, kind of talk about the box office failure, the failure launch with M3GAN 2.0 in a very interesting way. They thought they could do anything with that, and they feel like that they kind of misrepresented why people enjoyed the first movie or this character that much. It's interesting to read about from him. But I think, yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. I was trying to pin down last week and why this one didn't click as much, and you can only really theorize so much. But I think maybe it did have a lot to do with yeah, they're not making a horror movie this time. It's an action movie. M3GAN's the good guy now. Do we really want another one still? Do we really want to see this play out more? I don't know. Anyways, number 8 is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, making $2.7 million, adding to a domestic total of $191 million. So they are $4 million shy of outgrossing Rogue Nation, the other Christopher McQuarrie Mission Impossible movie. I'm sure they'll get that next weekend or the weekend after. Worldwide, though, it is sitting at $576 million, so it did outgross Dead Reckoning by $11 million. Way to go. It now sits behind Rogue Nation by $112 million, so a little more likely they'll outgross it domestically as opposed to worldwide. But that being said, I think the victory is outgrossing Dead Reckoning. We've talked about it before. It's probably not going to break even while it's in theaters, but the fact that, it did outgross the last movie technically now, which was seen as a bit of a box office disappointment, they did, manage to have a decent kind of run while it's here. And it might still be here next weekend, but the fact that it seems like they're having a bit more of a celebratory run compared to Dead Reckoning, which just kind of got buried by Barbenheimer, that's at least something to celebrate. They're closing in faster on 600 million worldwide than Dead Reckoning did. And who knows if they have the momentum to still get there, but, that's still better than nothing. Number 9 is Materialist, making $1.3 million, adding to a domestic total of $33 million. They have not outgrossed Iron Claw yet for A24. It's $2 million away from that, so currently it is still the 8th highest grossing film for them domestically. Worldwide, though, it is sitting at $45 million, so it did outgross Celine Song's previous film Past Lives here by $3 million. It's now sitting behind Iron Claw again, and Midsummer by just $1 million. Right now, it is number 16 on that list, but obviously, once they get that $1 million, they're going to advance 2 spots. So, still making some waves, even as it heads out of the domestic top 10. That's still pretty cool overall. Even if I find Past Lives to be a better film, I'm just glad that Celine Song had, another hit within the company. I look forward to seeing what else she can do creatively now. And finally, closing out the video, number 10, this is Spinal Tap, the re-release. Get fucked, Ballerina and Karate Kid. Those ones were kicked out. It made $1.06 million, adding to a domestic total of 4.7. Apparently this one, and I don't know why I said apparently. Maybe that's more obvious. I've never seen the film, and I don't really know a whole lot about its history with theaters. But I guess, yeah, it kind of isn't this big box office phenomenon. Maybe a bit more cult favorite, kind of underground kind of movie. And now it's re-released in theaters, and it's not getting a whole lot with re-release money, but enough to sneak into the top 10, which is good enough. Now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. Number 1, Superman. I think it will be interesting to see how much it makes versus our number 2, Jurassic World Rebirth. And by that, I mostly just kind of mean opening, but also overall. If Superman is going to just blast through and what if Jurassic World has this strong debut here but then kind of quickly falls off, or will these be able to live symbiotically? We'll see. Number 3 I think will be F1, number 4 How to Train Your Dragon, and number 5 Elio. But what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.